After watching Sony's latest state of play, I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed, mainly because although Wolverine and God of War Laufey looked great, my excitement for both games was generally low, as they just looked like reskins of games I've already played. However, something else that I noticed after the state of play is that after 6 years into this generation, Sony has virtually nothing to show for it. And if we compare the number of exclusives on the PS5 to previous generations, the PS5 ranks relatively low and lacks diversity in creative direction. For example, during the PS3 and PS4 eras, Sony's first-party portfolio grew tremendously with franchises like Uncharted, Infamous, Killzone, Little Big Planet, The Last of Us, Resistance, and many others. So the key takeaway from both eras is they both had a great abundance and diversity of exclusives. But fast forward to now, and all of this is gone. And so far in the PS5 era, we've only had 3 true major exclusives, which were Ghost of Yotei, Seros, and Spider-Man 2. And no, I'm not counting God of War Ragnarok or Horizon Forbidden West, as they're both on PS4 and PC. But even if I did, adding 2 more games wouldn't make much of a difference. Nevertheless, what's worse about these exclusives and the upcoming Wolverine and God of War Laufey is that they're all redundancies of one another. They're all third-person, over-the-shoulder, cinematic single-player games, and God of War Laufey looks just like the previous God of Wars, and Wolverine looks just like Uncharted 4 mixed with Spider-Man. So what this state of play confirmed to me was, in this generation, Sony has been lacking in terms of first-party output and creative direction, but like I previously stated, things weren't always like this. So what could have happened to Sony that caused them to have such a barren library of exclusives today? Well, before we talk about the downfall of Sony's first party, we first have to talk about the conditions that led to its peak first, which started in the PS3 generation. And the reason why we should start here is because prior to it, PlayStation's first party wasn't that strong, because they didn't need to be. This is because for the longest time, Sony's PlayStation was a preferred platform for gamers and developers, mainly due to Sony's use of CDs and Nintendo's refusal to adopt them. And since CDs were lower cost and had significantly more memory than Nintendo's cartridges and mini discs, developers favored making games for PlayStation consoles. This then resulted in blockbuster franchises like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Metal Gear, Tekken, GTA, and a lot of anime games to be PlayStation exclusives. So naturally, as a result, gamers gravitated more to PlayStation, and the PS1 and PS2 were the best-selling consoles for both their generations. And although Sony had blockbusters of their own like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Ape Escape, Legend of the Dragoon, and God of War, what really drove PlayStation's success at the time was its abundance of third-party exclusives. However, everything would change with the PS3. What's ironic about the PS3 is that when developing it, Sony made the same mistake that Nintendo made with the N64, that being making hardware that developers found difficult to work on because of the PS3's Cell Broadband Engine processor. Now, I'm not even going to pretend to know what all that means, but what I do know is that this processor made it a hassle for developers to make games for PlayStation. And this backfired on Sony because the Xbox 360's architecture was easier for developers to make games, and as a result, the 360 often had the superior version of a game over the PS3. Combine this with the 360 being $200 cheaper than the PS3 at launch, gamers found the 360 to be more attractive. So with the 360's better hardware and growing user base, developers had less reasons to be exclusive to PlayStation and started to put their games on both the PS3 and 360. And consequently, because of these reasons, Sony lost the third-party leverage that had made them dominant in previous generations. But not only that, at the same time, Microsoft was aggressively acquiring exclusives like Gears, Call of Duty 2, Mass Effect, and BioShock, and even got Japanese exclusives like Lost Odyssey, Tales of Vesperia, and Blue Dragon. And in addition, the 360 had exclusive early access to GTA, Red Dead, and Call of Duty DLC. And to top it all off, Microsoft's marquee franchise, Halo, was at its peak. All this to say, Microsoft was kicking Sony's ass, as within a few years, they went from industry newcomers to Sony's direct competitor, and were beating them. And worst of all, Sony had no answers for Xbox's exclusives. Therefore, in order to not lose this generation and not lose a decade worth of brand dominance, Sony had to turn things around, and fortunately for them, they did. From 2009 to 2013 is what many consider to be the Sony Renaissance, a time period when Sony launched some of the most iconic games from franchises old and new, like Killzone, Gran Turismo, God of War, SOCOM, Infamous, Uncharted, Demon's Souls, Resistance, The Last of Us, Little Big Planet, and more. And if we compare Sony's publishing output to the output of other publishers at the time, from a quality and impact perspective, Sony comes second to none, unless you count the yearly/bi-yearly slop franchises, but I don't. In short, in these 5 years, Sony expanded and invested more into their first-party studios and second-party relationships, which resulted in the PS3 catching up to the 360 and outselling it by a small margin. But these achievements couldn't be done without the leadership of a few exceptional individuals. Starting with Kaz Hirai, who took over as SCE's CEO after the PS3's launch and fixed most of its issues, like launching the more affordable PS3 Slim. Then in 2011, when Hirai was promoted to CEO for the entire Sony Corporation, his former position was given to Andrew House, who oversaw the later years of the PS3 and much of Sony's dominant PS4 era. Then below these two was Shuhei Yoshida, who became head of Sony's first-party studios in 2008, meaning he's the one who led and curated Sony's first-party output during the Renaissance. And after the Renaissance and into the PS4 era, Shawn Layden entered as president of SCE America in 2014, and Adam Boyes arrived from Capcom to become SCE's VP of Publisher and Developer Relations in 2012. And because of these two, Sony was able to bolster the PlayStation brand in North America and rebuild relationships with third-party developers. Therefore, because of the efforts of these 5 people, Sony rebuilt their brand, and in the PS4 era, became the strongest force in gaming. So, with that much success, how could Sony possibly mess it up? Well, it's simple. Sony let go of everyone I just mentioned. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. By the end of the PS4 generation, everyone that I just mentioned left PlayStation, starting with Adam Boyes in 2016, Andrew House a year later, and Kaz Hirai retired in 2019. Now, there's nothing peculiar about these 3 departures. They were just natural progressions at Sony. However, once Andrew House's replacement, Jim Ryan, became CEO, that's when things started to get weird. See, only a few months after Jim Ryan's takeover, it was announced that Shawn Layden was leaving Sony. And this was weird because not only was this announcement made a few months after Jim Ryan became CEO, but also made a few months before the PS5's launch. Which may seem inconspicuous to some, but is a big deal, as Shawn Layden was basically Sony's version of Nintendo's Reggie Fils-Aimé. He was present at almost every major gaming event, and like I previously stated, he represented SIE for North America. So to have someone who meant so much to the PlayStation brand and to the fans leave right before the PS5 launch raised eyebrows. However, what's even stranger is that after he left, Layden would go on various podcasts expressing his disapproval of live service games, AAA titles with ballooned budgets, the gaming industry's lack of creativity, and the industry's focus on live service games. All of these were common criticisms people had for Jim Ryan, so for Layden to side with his former boss's detractors, it led many to believe that his departure may not have been amicable. But once again, things got even weirder as a few months after Layden left, Shuhei Yoshida was demoted from head of first party to head of indies, and a few years after this, Yoshida announced his retirement from Sony in 2024. And in his retirement statement, he made it clear that he wasn't retiring from gaming and that he was just retiring from Sony, and that distinction made people even more suspicious of Jim Ryan's regime. And for a while, when asked about his last years at Sony and its future, Yoshida would come off as avoidant to protect his former bosses and company's name. That is until just a few months ago when he went on an interview and said this: "I helped Santa Monica to make God of War, Naughty Dog to make Uncharted and The Last of Us, and Sucker Punch to make the beautiful Ghost of Tsushima." Ghost of Tsushima was one of the last games that I worked on as the president of Worldwide Studios, but in 2019, after 11 years leading the first-party development, I was fired from the role. Jim Ryan wanted to remove me from first party because I didn't listen to him. He asked to do some ridiculous things, and I said no. This quote from Yoshida speaks volumes because it confirmed what many fans have suspected for years, that Jim Ryan's leadership at Sony was a failure, and not only did his decisions ruin PlayStation's brand, but it also led to the firing of people that knew what to do with it. Now I won't delve into Jim Ryan's terrible decisions, I'll save that for another video. Instead, what I'll do is briefly summarize his biggest mistake, which was his infamous live service initiative. With around a dozen live service games in development, so far only one has seen moderate success, that being Helldivers 2. The rest are either cancelled, shut down, unappealing, or currently going through development hell. And the games that were cancelled were Factions 2, Bluepoint's God of War, Twisted Metal, a Spider-Man multiplayer, Bungie's Operation Payback, one by Deviation Games, one by London Studios, and one by Bend Studios. That's 8 total games that haven't even seen the light of day. Moreover, the list of poorly performing games includes Concord, which shut down just after 11 days, and Marathon, which despite its moderate success, is a far cry from its expected success. And for the future games that may perform poorly, that list includes Fair Games, which has been going through development hell, and Horizon Hunters Gathering, whose trailer has more dislikes than likes. And as a result, Japan Studios, London Studios, Firewalk Studios, Bluepoint, and Deviation Games were all studios that shut down. And Bungie, as of writing this, is reported to lose Sony over $750 million from its acquisition, and is also reported to lay off almost 300 employees. So with that info, we can see why after 6 years, the PS5 generation has been underwhelming, and why Sony's first-party output has been the lowest in generations. Do you guys remember PSX, also known as PlayStation Experience, a Sony-hosted event where executives, developers, and fans got together to celebrate PlayStation? Well, the reason why I bring it up is because I believe it's a perfect representation of Sony's core philosophy during the PS4 era, that being embracing community. And the fact that Sony stopped PSX in 2019, the year Jim Ryan became CEO, is not a coincidence. It represents a shift of philosophy with the new regime. Because with events like PSX, it showcased how deeply executives like Layden and Yoshida cared for and understood their audience. And by understanding the importance of embracing community, Sony dominated in the PS4 generation. But in contrast, Jim Ryan's regime is more distant and cold. They don't care as much for their community and operate like a strict corporation that exists solely for profit. And there's nothing wrong with trying to be profitable, but as a gaming company, when you lack that soul and energy that was present in the PS4 era and choose to ignore your audience, well, you get 6 years of live service slop. All I'm trying to say is that during the PS4 era, Sony was winning. They had it in the bag, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to be number one. They just had to make more money. And as a scheme to increase share value and appease shareholders, Jim Ryan's desperate and greedy live service initiative led to the decline of PlayStation's brand. And the worst part is, he had people in his corner that warned him about this, but because of his hubris, Jim Ryan made them leave. So after all this, all I can ask is, what would have happened if Shawn Layden became CEO instead of Jim Ryan? What would have happened if Shuhei Yoshida remained as head of Worldwide Studios? And at the very least, what would have happened if Jim Ryan had just listened? If any of these things happened, then maybe Sony wouldn't be in the mess they're in now.